Hey, welcome to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
So today we're jumping into Nomadland. You know, that film that really captured attention, won a bunch of awards.
Oh, yeah. Big impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it gives this really intimate look at a pretty unique way of life, doesn't it? Life on the road.
Definitely. Very distinct.
We've got some interesting material to work with today. There's a podcast analysis we looked at, and some of my own notes focusing on Fern, the main character.
Right, trying to understand her perspective.
Yeah, precisely. Our goal, really, it's just to get under the skin of Fern's nomadic journey, figure out why she makes the choices she does. And we're sticking strictly to what our sources say.
Makes sense. Keep it grounded in the analysis.
And you really can't start talking about Nomadland without bringing up Frances McDormand as Fern. I mean, just universally praised, wasn't she?
Oh, absolutely. Her performance was, well, foundational for the movie.
What did the sources say really stood out about her?
Well, the podcast analysis we use, it really zeroed in on how powerful her portrayal was. One of the hosts called her interpretation masterful.
Masterful, okay.
Yeah, and they were really struck by her, quote, astonishing naturalness. It didn't feel like acting.
You really believe she was Fern living that life.
Exactly. And it wasn't just her either. The podcast made a point of saying the whole cast performed at an exceptional level.
Ah, interesting. So that overall realism, that feeling, it came from everyone involved.
Seems like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Really added to the film's weight.
Okay, so we've got this incredible performance bringing Fern to life. But what about that life itself, day to day? What did the sources tell us it actually, looked like? I'm guessing it wasn't all scenic landscape.
No, not at all. The podcast painted a very, very grounded picture. Practical stuff.
Like what?
Well, things like Fern dealing with changing her van's tires. Pretty basic maintenance, but also physically demanding.
Right. The nitty-gritty.
Yeah. But it wasn't just survival mechanics. The sources also mention her helping someone who was sick. Finding small personal moments, like playing her flute.
Oh, yeah, I remember those scenes.
And even just, the basics, like bathing in a river, is clearly described as a tough life. That phrase came up.
A tough life, sure. But the key is it's one she chose.
That's what the sources emphasize. It was an active choice.
And that's fascinating because even with all those hardships, she kept turning down chances for a more, let's say, conventional life. My notes really honed in on those moments.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. Can you walk us through some of those instances?
Well, the notes highlight several points where she could have easily stepped back into a more settled world. Her own sister, for instance, offered her a place to stay.
Right, a very direct, personal offer.
Family support.
Exactly. And then there was talk of available beds at a church, some kind of community stability, maybe.
Another option, yeah.
Yeah.
Providing some structure. And, of course, the big one feels like Dave's invitation to live with him at his son's house. That seemed like a real chance for, connection and a traditional home setup.
Absolutely. That felt like a potential turning point, didn't it? Which leads us nicely into her time actually trying that settled life.
Right. After her van breaks down, she lives with Dave for a bit. The podcast touched on this, and it really underscores this conflict between what maybe we as viewers want for her, settle down, be comfortable, and what she actually wants.
Yeah, and what's interesting is she doesn't just reject it out of hand. She experiences it. She gives it a go.
She tries it.
She gets that taste of settled life with Dave. And the podcast notes there's a real connection there. He asks her to dance, encourages her about smoking.
Gentle moments, shared quiet time.
Yeah, appreciating nature together, lovely scenes.
Yeah.
But then comes that clear realization. Our notes use the Spanish phrase, esa vida no es para él.
Meaning that life is not for her.
Exactly. Even though she tells Dave she enjoys being with him, enjoys his company, her core desire, her pull, is back to the road.
It really makes you ask, what is about that settled life that just doesn't work for her?
So let's dig into that. The why. Based on the sources, what are the main drivers behind her sticking to this nomadic path?
Well, the notes really seem to boil it down to two core reasons. First off, and the podcast analysis mentioned this too, it's deeply tied to keeping the memory of her dead husband alive.
Okay. The connection to him.
Yeah, living on the road, specifically in their van, it feels like a way to continue something they shared. The van itself is like this tangible link to their paths together.
It makes sense. A way of honoring him, perhaps.
And the second reason, just as critical it seems, is that personal realization we just discussed. Settled life simply is not for her.
So it's not just grief processing, it's more fundamental.
Seems so. It's about a basic alignment, you know? This way of living fits her, even with all the problems. It's like the road itself, the lifestyle, has become her home more than any building could.
Right. Which kind of brings us back to how the film itself portrays this whole lifestyle. I've talked about the tough parts, but what's the overall feeling Nomadland leaves you with about it?
Well, looking at the big picture, the film definitely doesn't romanticize it completely. It shows the practical side, living in the van, always moving, needing to be self-reliant, like fixing your own vehicle.
Yeah, the podcast pointed out those inherent challenges too. Van breakdowns, which are a constant threat.
A major source of anxiety, I'd imagine.
For sure. And also that undercurrent of constant melancholy and the solitude Fern deals with. It's not presented as easy.
No, definitely not.
But, and this is key, despite all that, despite the difficulties, despite having multiple clear alternatives offered to her,
She always chooses to go back.
consistently, she actively chooses that path again and again. It really forces you to reconsider what words like comfort or security even mean.
Yeah. It's interesting, too, that even within the podcast analysis we looked at, there wasn't total agreement on the film itself.
No.
Well, one of the hosts apparently found it, quote, not very exciting, a bit too reflective.
Ah, okay. More observational, maybe.
Yeah, maybe blurring the line between a narrative film and a documentary. That was the feeling.
That's a fair point, I suppose.
Yeah.
It raises questions about what you expect from a movie like this.
But the counterpoint was...
The other perspective mentioned in the podcast was that, okay, maybe it lacks traditional plot points or excitement, but its real strength is how it prompts reflection.
Reflection on what, specifically?
On big things, life choices, human connections, what home actually signifies for each of us. So maybe that perceived lack of excitement is actually what creates the space for that deeper thinking.
Interesting contrast. One person's slow is another person's thoughtful.
Kind of, yeah. Depends on what you're looking for.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive then, what are the main takeaways? What should we really hold on to about Nomadland and Fern's choices based on our sources?
I think the biggest thing is just how deeply connected Fern is to this life she's chosen. It's not just circumstances forcing her hand. It's a really personal commitment.
Rooted in memory and self-knowledge.
Exactly. Honoring her husband, yes, but also recognizing that conventional settled life just doesn't align with who she is fundamentally. The film shows the harsh realities, for sure.
It doesn't shy away from that.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it highlights her agency, her consistent choice to stay on her own, very unique path.
Yeah, and that leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty big thought to chew on, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Given Fern's absolute commitment to this life, the nomadic life, despite everything, the hardships, the easier options she rejects, what does home really mean?
Is it just four walls and a roof?
Or is it something else? Something internal, maybe. A way you live, a connection you carry, like her connection to her husband, or just a feeling of belonging that isn't tied to one specific place.
Yeah, it challenges that traditional definition.
And maybe bringing it closer to home for everyone listening, how does your own idea of a fulfilling life stack up against, what society often suggests we should want? Stability, possessions, roots in one place.
Fern's story certainly makes you question those assumptions.
It really does. Definitely food for thought. Well, thanks for exploring that with us today.
My pleasure. Fascinating film.